the episode, we did kind of talk about the Dungeon Keeper 2 fiasco, in which EA took a fully completed game, sliced it up into tiny little pieces, tried to put the Farmville mechanic into it, completely ignoring why the Farmville mechanic was there to begin with. Anyways, we could probably go on for a whole episode as to how badly they made it and then how badly they handled it afterwards.
You might say that EA were being villains.
Yeah, but not really the fun
But you're
kind.
not going to say that, though.
Yeah, not really the fun kind, though.
No.
The second problem, or I think like the big underlying issue, is that we wanted another Dungeon Keeper game. Because that's one of the fun things about playing video games, stuff like open stuff with Saints Row and Grand Theft Auto and just other games. We get to act out fantasies, and sometimes the fantasy is to be the bad guy, is to be the villain.
So that brings us to today's subject. Matt did not want me to do this as a title, by the way. Breaking down bad.
When I become an evil overlord and take over the world, those kind of jokes will be punished.
What joke? I'm kidding, of course it's a joke. I'm actually going to be really upset if I look up the periodic table afterwards and I find out I could have put a box somewhere on down.
Yeah, WN. Okay, so while he's doing that, we've had lots of examples in the video game industry about when you can actually play villains. I think there's Dungeon Keeper, of course, Overlord, the Deception series, or at the very least Deception Blood Ties. In fact, I think Drakeguard, you're technically playing a villain. And, there's lots of opportunities to do so, but they always seem to be handled kind of strangely. I think, Dungeon Keeper is the biggest and most obvious of all of them. It spawned a lot of spin-offs, a lot of wannabes, a lot of, we got our inspiration for Dungeon Keeper, but we didn't quite get it right t-shirts. And that kind of stuff. So, like...
The only major one that I'm thinking of was Evil Genius, which I wouldn't say was a bad or like a rip-off of Dungeon Keeper. I'm just curious, what were some of the ones that tried to do it that didn't do it well?
I can't remember too many. There was actually one called Dark Lord, which I think is the closest that we've ever come to actually getting it right. There was another one that was a Steam exclusive. I don't remember the name right off the top of my head, but it had several problems, including options, building, and the fact that the heroes never came in through the front door. Like, they would just spawn ladders randomly. So how exactly can you put traps in your dungeon when any empty space can just spawn a ladder?
You almost feel bad for your own minions whenever they're walking around and they accidentally trigger those same traps anyways.
Yeah. But then there's also been a lot of smaller examples. Horde was one where you get to play as a dragon. You get loot, you kidnap princesses, which sort of generated loot for you. I believe it suffered from a mass amount of technical issues, but it's a matter of a lot of examples. Overlord, another one, where you're really cartoony evil. The Overlord example, you're fighting something called the Empire, and it even says in the opening trailer, like, oh, and everyone in the Empire was, very happy, and those who weren't happy were killed or enslaved. And when you play and actually pay attention to what's going on, the Empire is actually evil. Like, they're subtly evil. We kill people, we enslave them, we take over town, and then you are cartoony evil because you're this huge guy in black armor with absolutely no face, a giant sword, some rudimentary magic spells, and a bunch of little goblin Russian terrier hybrids that you order around to do things. So you don't really feel,
you don't feel like you're disturbing the peace so much as you're doing something that someone wanted you to do anyways.
Yeah.
Because you're setting up the empires as the villains. Yeah. They don't come across as villainy.
Another example I believe I mentioned was actually the Deception 4 Blood Ties, actually a pretty recent one. That's a PS3 one. You play as essentially the daughter of Satan. I mean, technically speaking, you're a shard of his soul, and you manifest as a woman, and you have 3 demons which help you. But the point is to lure humans towards you, so they trigger a trap, and again triggers into another trap, and then triggers into another trap, and then triggers into a pie in the face, and then triggers to some BDSM props, that then triggers into a roller coaster. And you
actually score combo points for this too.
Absolutely, and it is amazing when you can actually pull them all off in succession. It's just so hilarious to watch. But when you actually read the lore from most of the people you're punishing, like these heroes are not nice people. They usually go around impregnating random women in towns, or stealing money off people. Like you don't really feel too much that you're playing the villain because you're not taking over anything. You're harvesting souls from people who essentially aren't very nice to begin with.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's a lot of fear involved in trying to make a game where you actually do terrible things to people. Because let's just think of like, okay, let's think of some real life examples of what would be defined as villains. The easiest one comes to my mind: Nazis. Now, picture a game where you're playing the Nazis. Even if it's just like on the actual battlefield itself, and you're shooting off American soldiers or anyone in the Allies, or you're even gunning down your own people for trying to desert you. What are you trying to gain out of that? Like there's no even sadistic joy to be gotten out of it unless you're like that very small portion of the population that's so sociopathic that you will replay the Call of Duty mission where you gun down an airport just to beat your high score.
Well, I think in the events of, like, Nazis is still a recent memory thing. They're an actual villain. I mean, if we're going to take actual villains of history, we might want to go to a period which is slightly romanticized.
Yeah.
Like, let's do Vikings.
Okay, I agree with you. The Nazis are still more on the recent side, but there has been plenty of chances already where people have even cartoonified them. And I'm thinking Indiana Jones just as one base example. But, okay, go ahead, Vikings.
Okay, let's take Vikings. I mean, at its simplest core, Vikings actually were very gender equal. They valued their women. It, like, obviously compared to other cultures at the time kind of thing, but, you know, they still did it unless you were a slave. Male slave owners could rape their female slaves with absolutely no impunity, and culturally speaking, their wives didn't have their wives probably did have an issue with it, but culture-wise, they're slaves, they're less than humans. And even if we were to go so far as pirates, like, they would go into a town, slaughter innocents, they'd just kill everyone, level everything, rape the women, and then immediately kill them, leave them. Like, all sorts of horrible things. We've said the R word a lot. I've said the R word a lot.
Yeah, but it needs to be brought up because it's the one word that a lot of people are, like, using to draw the line. Like, okay, all these other things, like you can play a pirate game, and you would be okay with, like, pillaging and killing people, but as soon as the pirate might do something else, which is somewhat natural for them to do, then we have a problem. And I think that the thing is, because rape is such a terrible thing to have happen, you can't use a very serious crime to commit against one person and then have a bunch of other kind of cartoony things. Like, the pirate would then have to go in and not just, like, you know, do a one-hit combo and then just knock people down. The pirate would have to, like, slash at them, and the guy would be, like, in pain, and they'd be crawling away, begging for mercy, and the pirate would have to go in and finish them. When they're robbing things, people would be crying because some of their precious family heirlooms are being taken away from them, and people are getting kidnapped, and people are struggling, and I'm sure a kid comes in, bites one of the pirates, the pirate is like, I am not dealing with this today, and he guns the kid down. Like, it would make everything darker, so they're just not going to go there.
Yeah, I would also like to point out this whole thing, especially like in The Princess Bride, of, oh, the great, pirate Roberts takes no prisoners. You know, if he just robs the people, leaves them on the boat, and then sails off to the sunset, he's left a bunch of people on the boat. He hasn't taken any prisoners. He hasn't killed them, but he hasn't taken any prisoners. So the whole thing, that's the ultimate evil. A pirate takes no prisoners. Well, he could just leave them on the boat.
I think that particular analogy refers to whenever somebody is fighting back. It's like a prisoner of war kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't show mercy and I don't take prisoners. You fight me, you die.
Or they might just leave them on the boat, but then burn the boat down, in which course, everyone dies. Is that really necessary? But anyway, sorry, that's getting a little off topic.
Yeah, one other historical group that does get villainized a lot would be the Roman Empire.
Yeah, but, at least when they beat up and destroyed things, they tend to leave culture and math and language stuff in their wake.
They thought they were doing the right thing by pushing society forward, and because some of the work they did can be argued as good, I think a lot of other tyrants later down the line looked at that example and thought, well, maybe what we're doing is right too.
Oh, yeah. I think it's actually, going back to the Nazis, they called themselves the Third Reich, and one of the ones they counted was the Romans.
Doesn't surprise me whatsoever. One game that I played This would be back on the GameCube. It was Spartan Total Warrior. You played the Spartans, which usually gets to be the heroes in most of their stories, because it's always a smaller group of highly skilled warriors going up against more difficult odds, and the Romans were the enemies in pretty much the whole thing. And you also fought an undead faction, but I think they were raised by a Roman scientist. But
Roman necromancers?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
It's easy that, like, the bigger the group is, the easier it is to villainize them, because they become less of, like, a single person who's out to get you and more like a collective conscious acting against you. So it's like when you hear pirates, you don't just think of your local pirates that are terrorizing you. It's like, oh, here they come again. Get the pillage ready. Like there's thousands of them out there.
Yeah.
It could be any number of pirates. Like you can get robbed by pirates, and then another group of pirates come in and like, we're sorry guys, but the other pirates took everything. And the pirates are like, which way did they go? It's like that way. You're just like, yeah, we're coming after them. You gonna bring back any of our stuff? No, we're taking it. We're pirates too.
It's actually, when you look at, historically speaking, the sort of origin of the great pirates was there was a nice naval age and all these conflicts were happening, the conflicts ended, and they pretty much booted out half their navy. So that's where sort of some of the great pirates came from. It's like, shit, we're seamen, we are, naval officers, and now the Navy has downsized us. What are we going to do? Well, we've only ever been seamen our whole life, so let's become pirates. I mean, yes, there's lots of examples of outlaws just nabbed a ship either through paying for it or a janitorial dispute, and then they go off and pirating. But, some of the great pirates, again, were once naval officers, were once very intelligent, cultured people who, the king just said, whatever, pirate, naval thing isn't in at this point. Ninjas are in, so we're gonna fire all our naval officers and get some ninjas. And then once ninjas are uncool, we'll just get rid of ninjas. Oh look, cyborgs! So the whole passive.
They just transition from ninjas to cyborgs. Using ninjas, you've been working out for the last 4,000 years, but we got robotics now. So
Mortal Kombat did that. All the Shaolin ninjas became cyborgs or were forcibly transformed.
Yeah. It's funny because, like, when you're describing these pirates are former naval officers, there's another example of one side viewing them as villains, and then the pirate side viewing themselves as victims and protagonists, and now they're acting against the Empire.
When you think about it, I really do feel sad for space pirates. I mean, we haven't invented...
Which space pirates? Because the Metroid space pirates had it coming.
Well, you see, we haven't actually invented space travel yet, so all the space pirates are currently sitting at their home, probably still living with their mothers, wondering when they're going to invent rocket ships and have it mass-producible enough for them to become space pirates. So they're just sitting around doing nothing right now. I mean, it's a very...
How many scientists do you think are working towards space travel just because they know they could be responsible for the first space pirates? I mean,
More than we'd like to think.
Society is saved because the dredges of it are roaming space. So one thing I wanted to do was just bring up a couple of examples of what I think make good villains, but on a personal scale and not necessarily like a group.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if the whole point is we want to play the villain, then they have to be somewhat relatable. Yeah. I think.
What would you prefer as a gamer? Would you prefer to act as a unit in a larger group so that you're not thinking about your own individual perspective of it and you're just one of them, or would you want to be the guy in charge? And would you want to have your own motivations and your own reasoning why you're making these people do this for you, or you don't have an army, you're just a bad guy?
So, if I may attempt to reword the options, sure. You are presenting it as, do you want to be
minion or master?
Okay, that's simplest person. I'm not quite sure. I mean, if you play the minion, there tends to be a story involved. Like, your actions are part of a greater story, therefore a narrative can be woven together, and maybe it creates, just something nice you can be a part of, like any typical RPG. Whereas if you're the master, you're usually making all the calls, you're usually monitoring everything, micromanaging everything to high hell, you're, being Kerrigan, the Swarm Lord, doing her thing. I would like to add as a third option just to consider the rogue, the villain who's out to feed himself and just take care of himself, that kind of thing. Like he may have
Yeah.
a bit of a crew underneath him, but it's not like a grand empire thing. It's, myself and my lads, or just myself wandering from town to town, pillaging and that kind of stuff. So I guess the three options, it really depends how it works. Again, if you're a minion, then that means you're part of a grand story. It gives the writers a chance to create a whole narrative, and even gives you the possibility to maybe want to rebel, to decide, I'm evil, but this is one step too far. Now I'm going to work
Or
for
it's not one step far enough, and I want to be even more evil.
Yeah, so it would give you a chance to spend most of the time working under somebody, and then have the possibility to decide, you know what? I'm the new boss. I'm going to go and fight the very person I'm taking orders from.
Okay.
If you're playing the Overlord, then the only person who really challenges you are other Overlords, because typically speaking, if you are an Overlord, it's like, ha, minion number 4572 is rebelling. Dear Diary.
Yeah.
And
Today, I pressed the make an example of button.
oh my God, they need to do that.
Yeah, so we broke down a couple of groups, but individual villains that are iconic or just strongly written. I mean, the easiest one to go to would be the Joker. But I think he is worth bringing up because what I think makes a great villain is how they seem to be every kind of possible parallel to their heroic counterpart, which in this case is Batman. And Batman is order, Joker is chaos. It's like that's the most fundamental one. When you break down like individual stats, Batman knows how to fight and he realizes himself. Joker doesn't really fight and he manipulates other people and he fights dirty. Batman has a plan to respond to threats. Joker has plans to create threats. And it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, Joker's always struck me as a bit of a strange villain, because you think in any even chaotic society, how could he exist? I mean, I've often made the joke, if you took the Joker out of the DC comic book universe and put him in the Marvel universe, he'd die. But anyway, I think Batman actually is a great example when it comes to talking about villains, because he has some of the best villains out there. Someone even did a short analyst of that, saying like, oh, Two-Face, the duality between crime and order and all that stuff. Scarecrow, the Batman's use of scare tactics. And then it's weird because they stumbled on Poison Ivy, and I thought Poison Ivy's, she's easy. Batman is a defender of man's law. Poison Ivy is a defender of nature's law. So in her eyes, she's actually a good guy, and that actually makes her a really interesting villain, because she's not a villain to herself. She's a hero. She's saving the natural world, which the humans are the villains for. So she's a great contrast to Batman. Then you can add Azrael to the mix, who's sort of a vigilante, and he's a defender of God's law. But that's doing a whole episode on Batman villains, which would still be an awesome idea, but not what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Another villain, less known because not enough people went to go see Serenity, but if you're familiar with the Firefly universe,
oh yeah,
the villain from Serenity is only as the operative. And if there's anybody in the world that's going to piss off Malcolm Reynolds, it is going to be a character so detached from himself that he gives himself to the Alliance fully. He removes his name, he has no rank, he does exactly what the Alliance tells him to do without question or without hesitation. He feels remorse for his actions, and I think that's important because you still empathize with this guy who's doing what it is he's designed to do, even though it's tragic and it's horrible, some of the things that he's done in that movie.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you remember, but he actually mentions that the world he's building, like, the perfect society or whatever, he has no place in it. So the idea is he's going to help create this perfect utopia and then pretty much just off himself because he's got no place in this perfect utopia. So he is so dedicated to the cause that once he's eliminated every other monster, there will still be one monster left. That is him. Yeah. And he seems to be fully prepared to off himself when that happens.
Yeah, and I think what makes him great is that here's a guy that, in Malcolm's eyes, proves that Malcolm is right. The whole point of rebelling against the Alliance and fighting the whole war in the first place was because you can't just make people the way you want to make them. People have the right to just be whoever they are. So when this guy comes along and he is made in the Alliance's image, Malcolm's like, I don't want to see another person like this. And I don't want to see a society of people like this. So in my eyes, I have to act against this because this is exactly what I've been doing this whole time. This is what I was afraid of.
This is why I put on the brown coat to begin with. And it also is a very, very fitting ending, because remember, the operative didn't die, but he was, for all intents and purposes, he was killed. He was defeated. He was shown a greater truth that finally got through that thick skull and told him what was going on wrong. So, like, they did depart with Malcolm saying, like, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. And he was saying, like, don't worry, you'll never see me again. So it's possible he went off and killed himself.
Sorry, that scene was raining. I'm just picturing he, like, just slips off the ground and that's it.
Well, but...
This is not a good death. There is a lot of shame in this.
Wow, that was anticlimactic.
I actually did fall on my sword.
It was purely an accident.
Yeah.
You're supposed to throw yourself here. Let's sit the sword there and... Alright, 1, 2... Okay,
Yeah.
but we're going... But he was defeated on an emotional level, realizing, oh shit, like, this is horrible.
Yeah, emotional... sorry, I feel like I have to replace that word with idealistic.
That is better. That is a better word than mine.
Okay, but keep going.
But he was defeated on that level and thus became someone different. So you beat someone in the main way that matters. I mean, you can kill someone, that's okay, but if you stab somebody or gut them while they're declaring freedom, you haven't really beaten them. You've killed them. Congratulations. You've rendered them inert.
You've probably made another 100 people even more defiant. Because you took out their symbol, but you didn't break him. Even you've clearly referenced Braveheart in this.
Yes.
And he knew that like some of his own people were watching him die, and he proved to all of them that they didn't turn him against Scotland. That he died being the guy that he wanted to be.
Yeah, and just the final sort of line of that movie that wasn't voiceover, like, you bled for McCullen, now bleed for me. McCullen? Oh God, I just...
Wallace.
McWallace or Wallace?
It's just Wallace.
I thought for sure it was a Mick.
Look, the only reason why I remember Wallace so vividly is because of how much time I spent in the Age of Empires 2 tutorial. I mean, I had the demo, was pretty much all I could play.
Yeah, okay. It's just been way too long, and, you know, we have comments disabled anyway, so who exactly is going to eat me out?
By the way, for those of you who would like to provide feedback, feel free to email joe@giantenemycomment.com. Legit, I will read emails on the show.
And any hate mail that he receives concerning me will probably be forwarded to me. No guarantee I'll read them, but they will be forwarded. Rest assured, they will clutter my inbox for a short amount of time before heading to the junk. See, like that's good responses. Okay, so what we still, I guess, haven't really addressed the thing of we want to be the villain. Okay, so we're playing a game. We're going to be the bad guy. How exactly do you do that in a way that makes us want to do it? Like, let's.
Well, first I'm going to go deliberately off track and answer why do I like playing the hero? Because in life there are many things that I do not have control over that I wish I did have control over because I know I can make it better.
Mm-hmm.
In a game, it's different. In the game, I am everything. I am the reason why good things happen. Now. I don't.
Power fantasy.
I don't specifically like have urges to make things worse. Although I do get petty and I do get angry about things, and there are times where there are people that I would love to see get taken down a peg or get not killed, but just lose their job. I'm thinking of some very specific examples right now.
Yeah.
Currently looking for work. No, so when I play a bad guy or I'm playing evil, I think the game in particular says a lot about what it is I'm feeling. And I just remember as a kid playing Rampage a lot. Whenever I would get to the arcade, I would play Rampage. And that game was clearly a kid's game, and you definitely played a villain because you went around smashing society, crushing buildings, eating people, blowing up tanks. And that's just a way to take out some of that frustration that you have in life in general, and just smash things until you get bored of it and then walk away and maybe feel a little bit better.
What is good in life if not to crush your enemy, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of the women? I really need to look up that word one of these days.
Lamentation?
Yeah.
I think you used it properly.
Well, I know I used it properly because I was quoting Conan the Barbarian. I just don't know what it means. Does it mean crying or is...
Lament is like resentment.
Okay.
You kind of hate that it's happening.
Okay. But yes, crush your enemy, driven before you, hear the women crying, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so another example would be Knights of the Old Republic. There was a game where you could end up the villain. Spoiler warning. Seriously, like, do I have to? Anyways.
It's
And-
a really old game at this point.
Well,
Chrono dies and you play as a clone, which is a
Well-
biblical reference to Jesus.
Okay, I actually hadn't beaten Chrono Trigger. Thank you. It's fine. There is a cutoff point, but so in Knights of the Old Republic, the way it's marketed is that you can walk the path of the Jedi or the path of the Sith.
Mm.
So that's clear before you even start the game. But what's not clear is that the Sith do have an opportunity to explain their ideology to you. So sometimes you're playing the bad guy just because you happen to agree more with what they're saying than with what the Jedi are saying. And you actually convince yourself that the Jedi are evil and that what you're doing is the right thing to do.
Mm.
So sometimes you play a bad guy because you just want to upset the established order and make some sort of change.
Yeah. Actually, I think an example we haven't really touched on up to this point is the Warhammer 40k universe. Because nobody's a good guy in there. I mean, even...
Not even the Empire? Or
the Imperium? No? No, I mean, the Imperium is two components, technically speaking. I mean, yes, there's chapters and factions. You have two components. You have the Adeptus Astartes, which are the Space Marines, and they're overly religious, very hating of all aliens, of all other cultures. They're very critical of themselves. If you look at the Blood Drinkers, they're supposedly good guys, but they go in rampant blood rage and battle fury, and technically speaking, Helios made a deal with Chaos Demons. Oh shit, that was the mother of all spoilers. Frack. I can't believe I said that. Oh shit.
completely dead-faced. Just keep going.
Okay, but anyway, then you have the Imperium, which are unmodified standard garden variety humans, and you can actually kill them. Like, when you're playing as them, you can kill your own people to inspire the rest of them to fight harder. So the whole human society is overly religious, very unaccepting of alien cultures, go around conquering everything, and the Imperium has no problem sacrificing whole worlds if it means gaining new technology or lost technology or any of that stuff. And then when you look at every other culture, you can look at the Eldar, which are incredibly enlightened and a dying race. They're pretty much going extinct. So they're willing to sacrifice millions of any other race if it means saving hundreds of theirs. Because, again, they're going extinct and they actually have an afterlife where they all go to hell.
So they're fighting for survival then.
They're fighting for survival. And
But no matter, I think what you're saying is that like no matter what faction you play, everyone has to kill somebody else for a reason.
yeah, I mean,
And it's just a matter of like picking which one is the most gung ho about it. You can go as high as the Eldar, who are only doing it because their own lives are at stake, and then as far down as the Orcs, who just have a jolly good time killing things.
I mean, even the Hive Mind has a grand plan for the universe. I think the closest thing you have to good guys in the Warhammer 40k universe would be the Tau, because they don't hate other alien species, they just believe that their banner should be flying high. Like, you orcs, there is a place for you in the universe underneath us. You still exist and still do your stuff.
So they're elitist.
They're elitist. They believe their culture is the best, and that they're the army of the greater good. And essentially speaking, all other species are allowed to exist in the galaxy. We're not going to wipe you all out, but you have to understand that we're the best, and we're the ones you have to, be emanating, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time playing vanilla World of Warcraft, because I thought World of Warcraft did a great job in not just introducing like one adversary, but in introducing many adversaries that each particular faction was dealing with. I mean, you had the humans had other humans that were trying to undermine them. You had, and like the further on you would get through the game, you would come across other factions that are also evil. All the way to get to the endgame raid content, and you bring down the biggest, baddest mothers in the World of Warcraft, which are also, incidentally, the most threatening. And then with each expansion, the idea was, and this is in classic Blizzard tradition, the new threats would always be the most threatening thing. So Illidan would be the threat in Burning Crusade, because nothing can really intimidate Illidan that's already there. And then, of course, Illidan lost to Arthas, so naturally Arthas would be the next thing. And then panda stuff happen. I'm going to stop there.
Mhm.
But what the point that I want to bring up about World of Warcraft is that I think a good way of having all these different factions and adversaries is making each one come at you at a different scale. So, like, if you're playing the Alliance and the Horde are coming after you, or vice versa, they're your enemies.
Mm.
And you don't treat them the same way you treat the raid bosses. Or, what's the name of the Fire Lord? I can't remember. Oh, I can't believe I can't remember the name of the Fire Lord.
I want to say Balthazar, but
That's
really don't.
that's the Guild Wars 2 god. I mean, he shows up a bunch of other places, too.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a different game.
Oh, and I think he was, like, named in Warcraft 3 as well. I cannot believe this is happening right now.
Dreadclaw. Was he the dragon that has a mechanical jaw?
No.
But that is, like, okay, that's not a bad boss. He's a dragon with a metal jaw. Okay, I can dig that.
Ragnaros. That's it.
Ragnaros. Ah,
Okay.
yes, I remember. I have heard of him.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're thinking about, oh, man, we're going to take on Ragnaros tonight. That's some scary we could die. I mean, it's a game, so we'll respawn, but still, we could die. And then, like, you're on your way there, and the Horde are coming after you. Like, oh, seriously now? The Horde? So I think it's great when a game can make you treat different villains in different lights. Like in Final Fantasy, I want to say 6, using the Japanese Richter scale. Kefka was obviously like a devastating villain. But
Pretty
then
much the Joker of the Final Fantasy universe.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like throughout the game, you keep being attacked by this octopus by Ultros, who's just like he's such a bafflingly weak villain. But he keeps coming up in situations that you really don't want him to show up on, and it actually gets like this opera scene where
I love that level.
Like, all right, everybody, we're doing this, and they start playing a song as you're fighting Ultros. And it's a joyful experience fighting off this villain, because this villain wants to kill you, and it's almost cute. Like, oh yeah. It's like a cat, you know. Cats are villains as much as, and they want to kill us. I mean, everyone knows that, but they're so adorable. He's just like, yes, good cat. You plot my death.
Yes, you'll be a villain one day. Don't worry. Yeah. Maybe in the expansion.
Our cat plotted our death quite a few times. She used to lay traps on the staircase. She would take all our toys and put it on like steps, so when we walked down, we might slip on it.
Wow.
Yeah, we outsmarted her.
Mm.
But it's not over yet.
Yes, round 3 pending. But anyways, how exactly can we craft a villain that we want to play? Now, I think one of the best examples of an archetype for a villain, we can even go as recent as 300 Rise of an Empire. And I'm going to kill myself for not remembering her name, because I actually really like that movie. But the main villain in there, she was very horribly mistreated. Her village was beaten, she was taken as a slave, she was forcibly fornicated upon as a child and left for dead. So you understand why she hates the bad guys so much. But when you look at who she is now, she is so unforgivably insane and so adamant about the revenge plot and manipulative. It's like, so you understand where she came from, but who it turned her into is just so out there that she's allowed to do whatever the hell she wants. And she never once uses her tragic backstory. It's like, oh, I'm beating you up because once upon a time, your people were mean to me, and they locked me in a ship, and there was big hairy men. It's like,
everybody was getting ice cream. I only got one scoop.
Yeah, but, she was so unforgivably insane, but still, she got there through a means that we can sympathize with. So, someone like her, playing a character like her in a video game would be magnificent, because you have the sympathizable, the, oh my god, this is so tragic story, but then you leave it open enough that we can just turn around and turn into the Joker if we want to, that we can grab a hold of a garbage truck, put on a bowler hat, and just go down Main Street spraying sewage on everybody. I'm not quite sure where the heck I got that example from.
Well, if you've done the example, I've got one. Grand Theft Auto 5 was the first time that you played multiple characters throughout the whole of the story, and it took the 3 main ways that people perceive playing a Grand Theft Auto character. Michael is the old professional who treats it like a job. You have Trevor, who is pretty much like the closest thing to what the angry parents think of when they think Grand Theft Auto. Just a raging alcoholic drug user who wakes up in a dumpster somewhere and he just goes off these killing sprees. And then you have Franklin, which I thought was the most interesting character because he's still young and he's still got his life to make up his mind as to what he wants to do, and he wants to get into crime because he sees crime as not only a profession but a better profession than what his current life is. So I think one of the best ways to make you want to play a villain is to say, if you become a villain, your life will get better. And then you start going down that Breaking Bad morality path where how far are you willing to go?
Yeah, that is something I'll definitely say was very interesting about the show, in it that one bad decision led to being forced to make another bad decision, being forced, and eventually speaking, there are no more goods. You just got all these branching pathways leading to various dead ends, and maybe one lets you live for 2 minutes longer than this other one.
Well, I like, and not to, I mean, if we wanted to do an episode of Breaking Bad, we could, but I mean,
I would sooner yield the Bravely Default episode before the Breaking Bad episode.
Fair enough. I might take you up on that. But like Breaking Bad, like every decision is subjective. Like even the first decision he makes to just start cooking meth in general, some people be like, well, okay, making poison is bad, so he's automatically a bad person, and everything else in this I totally understand because he's going to be terrible. But then they go through the effort of showing you why someone in a position might actually decide to do it. And then every decision is like, well, you know what? That was the right thing to do. And then those people are challenged as the show goes on because the calls he makes are harder and harder and harder to justify. But you can still justify them if you wanted to.
Okay, so he's an example of fantastic. How exactly would you translate that into a video game setting?
Yeah, that's tricky. Well, for one, I would certainly amp up the chemistry mechanic, so he would throw those fulminating bombs all over the place.
Well, I think one possibility would be to have something that isn't a direct fighter or direct shooter or direct brawler, like having, I don't want to say an adventure game, but something a little bit more subtle, less action-y, and give you... Telltale might actually be able to do something like that. They've been
like a point-and-click adventure thing.
Yeah, but
I think an episodic series would make a lot of sense, especially because like if you, The Walking Dead, I don't think anyone ever looked at Lee as a bad guy, but Lee definitely had the opportunity to make choices that would be to the detriment of others.
Oh yeah,
even just like in the way he talks to people. So I think I think you're right. I think episodic would be a good way to do it.
I think another possibility, especially since we're talking about video games, this has been done before, is someone who's just, laughably cartoony evil. That's not necessarily a bad thing to do. It's just we haven't really been able to find the right mix of it.
Yeah.
I think one good example may in fact be the rogue was the wrong word to the top-down sort of Diablo-ish game, Dungeon Land. The idea is that you have a party of people who pick from these very... Like, the warrior's really short and bald and has a large sword. The thief is really tall with long arms and, facial hair, that kind of stuff. But you could also play as the bad guy, and when going into the match, you select what are the mid-bosses I want to use, what are the minions I like, and they'd have some minions spawn on their own, but then you'd be able to play this here, maybe wait a bit, let your mana recharge so that you can play a nice big boss here.
Yeah.
You'd pick which final boss it was, and at any point you could also hijack any minion you wanted. So if you've got this bull NPC running around, whatever, you hijack him, he gets your evil mastermind hat so people know you're hijacking him, and you can now specifically aim your charges. Like that I think was a great example with the one main problem of it wasn't fun to play the heroes in that game. There's very few things you could do.
Mm-hmm.
The odds were very clearly and unforgivably stacked against you. If you as the heroes had a little bit more oomph, a little more like what you could maybe do, some options, like, the thief, it does more damage when he stabs people from behind. Wow, that's
that kind of narrows down the options as to what the thief should be doing.
Could I maybe get some throwing knives, or get some alternate weapons that aren't just stabby daggers? But it came down to it wasn't as fun to play as the heroes, and therefore it's hard to play as the villain because you really need some victims.
Yeah. Another one I was thinking of, completely different direction, but the Postal series. That was a game that was going for pure catharsis. Just like you didn't have to do bad things if you didn't want to, but then you're missing the point of playing the game.
Yeah.
It was all just about how quickly is this game going to set you off, and then how far are you gonna take it before you like, okay, that went too far. And I really would like to see some games that that go in that direction and start challenging some of the problems that we deal with today. Like start dealing with race and start dealing with sexual assault and deal with homophobia and being afraid of like people who are either transgendered or cisgendered, as apparently I'm labeled, and just start like tackling against these human anxieties in a way that is bad, because you can't always dress it up, and it'll cause controversy, but controversy is great because it gets people talking again.
Well, I mean, Postal is something that's meant to take place in some kind of twisted B-movie version of the real world, but it's nevertheless, it has recognizable buildings. As that
Gary Coleman is in it. I mean,
yeah, so it's that specifically. Well, I thought the whole point of that really was making fun of Grand Theft Auto, or sort of being Grand Theft Auto-ish.
I wouldn't look at that and think Grand Theft Auto. Although Grand Theft Auto does have some things in common, because you want to just go on a shooting spree, you can.
Yeah, if you want to make fun of Grand Theft Auto, you look at Saints Row.
Yeah, but I think with like Grand Theft Auto games, what always gets the most flack is that you can just go on gun down cops. Now, for one, I don't really like shooting cops because I like cops, so I never really do that. But I mean, even if I were doing that, I'm not even doing that because I'm invested in the character and the story. I'm just doing that because like, all right, in every Grand Theft Auto game, I need to see if I can get to 6 stars before I die. Like I need to see if I can do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that sort of brings up, the whole setting for playing the villain. I mean, if you want to play the villain in the medieval ages or in some kind of far-off space lands, like playing the Zerg in Hearts of the Swarm. I actually got it right. But you're playing, they're trying to take over the galaxy, and, the Blizzard 3-stage thing is you play as the humans, you fix the human problems, then you play as the Zerg, and they're taking over and basically making up for the fact that you fixed human problems. And eventually you're going to play as the Protoss, they're going to fix everything, and like the universe will be fine again until they make another StarCraft 3 in 15 years. But if we even get the third expansion in any reasonable amount of time. But you're playing as someone who wants to consume the galaxy, and it's in a romanticized setting. It's in the far sci-fi future. Kerrigan is supposed to be somewhat relatable, even though she's technically the Queen of Blades, Swarm Lord, whatever thingy. And even back to Dungeon Land, you're taking a fantasy environment. So if you try to play the villain in a modern environment, that's, I think, where you get the most amount of flack. When you're driving an actual car in a video game modeled after a real car, running people over and shooting them, that's when people raise an issue. If you're playing a car...
You're being deliberately evil. It's like you're not even having a method to it. You're just going nuts.
Exactly. If you're playing the video game version of... I want to say Death Race, but Death
Keep
Race
talking.
Right.
I do just want to check on one thing.
Okay, well, if you play as the video game version of whatever that movie was, where to control population, they had people in cars running everybody down. Then...
Death Race?
Okay, I guess it was Death Race.
Or Carmageddon.
Carmageddon, or one of those.
Yeah, well, Death Race was, I think, a game and a movie, and in the movie, people got... There was a remake. The old one is still better. You got points for, like, running down people.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's... Again, that is a romanticized setting. I mean, not literal romanticism, but it's always easier to play the villain in a setting that isn't directly modern day, because you avoid the whole sociopath accusation of, well, you secretly have a desire to pick up a double dildo and start beating up cops. Well, no, I have a secret desire to enslave dragons to my will and start burning down villages filled with peasants. Because peasants are smelly.
Mm-hmm.
And dragons eat peasants.
Right. What I'm going to recommend to people is to play Spec Ops: The Line. I think of all the games I've played that challenged me in my good or evil morality, Spec Ops was the one that really made me think about what I was doing. Because you can make the argument that you are the bad guy and that everything else would have been better off without you, or you can argue that you're the good guy, and it doesn't matter which direction you take, both sides are going to challenge you on your thought process throughout the most of the game, right up until the very end.
I think that
you walk away thinking like, wow, okay, that actually made me think. I mean, BioShock is a good example too, but in BioShock it's pretty clear with your morality, whether you're going to be a good guy or a bad guy, based on how you treat little girls. It's pretty obvious.
Yes, do you murder them and harvest their organs, or do you shove your hand down your throat and pull out this weird slug thing that's inside them? Neither of which are particularly... But I think Spec Ops actually is a fantastic example because it doesn't have a blatant morality meter. Most of the time when we see a main character have the option of being good, being evil, or doing things
it's like a game mechanic.
Yeah, and you'll see...
You fill up your evil bar and you get the evil powers.
Yeah, and it'll always come down to the more of one you have versus the other will open up particular options. If you, like, there's very few games, especially RPGs, that have this kind of mechanic that lets you walk a middle road. Like, I want the freedom to be nice to my allies and then be an absolute jackass to my enemies. Which, without necessarily saying I'm always a jackass or whatever, but Spec Ops is a great example because it does give you a morality system without ever justifying the morality system. It's invisible. You have to live with it. It's one of the games that really drives home you didn't get the blank ending. You got the ending that reflected your choices. It doesn't really have a name.
Yeah. I have to say the story with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I thought played up that pretty well. Because the whole reason why the Russians were attacking the United States was because of a misunderstanding. And it was an even more evil faction. So it comes back to that Alliance versus Horde and World of Warcraft thing where some people are dealing with the major antagonist and the reason why all this has happened. And then you get the much more tragic and the much more relatable story of the ground people who are following orders and have to shoot other people who are following orders. Neither side probably wants to do it.
I would like to say, just as a point, because I believe we've occupied a lot of time at this era, multiplayer games, while not necessarily giving you a chance to play the villain per se, at least give you a nice chance to play villainous characters. Like if you're thinking of fighting games, you've got people like Quan Chi, Mu-12, Terami, stuff like that. If you even look as far as Dota 2, you can play as Doom, otherwise known as Doombringer, otherwise known as Lucifer, otherwise known as he who's burned but not consumed.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because like the rating in the Dire I think is a little subjective. I mean, some guys are clearly good, some guys are clearly evil, but then some characters are just, in my opinion, a little too sympathetic to be bad guys, or vice versa. Like I would have thought Centaur Warrunner would have been a Dire just because he just loves fighting and like clobbering people, and I would have thought Magnus would have been a Radiant character because he's more about vengeance and trying to get his people back. And speaking of vengeance, Vengeful Spirit has been wronged. Imagine if like Vengeful Spirit was on the Dire and Skywrath Mage was on the Radiant.
Oh yeah,
that would have made their relationship even more difficult.
Their relationship is as difficult as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And you look at someone like Necrolik, who he's a constructed life form, and his job is to retrieve souls who've escaped the afterlife. Hey, you died. Go to the narrow maze for sorting, and then go to your appropriate afterlife. If you escape, like, he's just leaving
doing his job.
Exactly. Like, he doesn't really seem to be good or evil. And Sand King, he's the avatar of the omnipotent desert. I mean, he's not really good or evil. It's a matter of one day the whole world is going to die off and be sand. So fight me all you want. Oh, and of course, let's not forget Harbinger. Sometime after all of Defense of the Ancients is over, he's just going to destroy the universe. It's predestined. It's like he loses a match and he'll say, "This changes nothing." Even thanking people, may you die last.
Yeah.
But yeah, multiplayer games at least gives you a chance to play an evil character, even if it's just for a bit, and enjoy the quirks, enjoy the responses, and just have, a bit of fun there. You're not really conquering worlds or raiding and pillaging and forcibly fornicating with your slaves, but it gives you a chance to say, yes, I am Broodmother. I am here to infest everyone with spiders. I don't even think we can get any further than Doombringer. I mean, hi, I'm Lucifer, Fire Lord of Darkness. He who is burned is not consumed. You can't really get much higher than that.
No, I mean, he's the devil.
Yeah, he's not even a sympathetic devil. I mean, sometimes they make the devil...
He's a greedy asshole.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they make the devil be a sympathizing person who, I have been tragically wronged and framed as a horrible...
Fallen from heaven kind of thing.
Yeah, but, he consumes people's souls to get extra gold for doing it. That's Doombringer.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who consume souls, and there's people that chew.
He gets a little stat
Yeah.
thing. He's
Oh
still
man,
digesting.
we never even really got in or brought this up because it's not really a video game, but I mean Dungeons and Dragons. There is an
Yes,
example of
dude. I can't
the
believe I didn't do
dungeon
that.
master could be like an evil person who is creating all this terrible problems that these heroes have to overcome.
Exactly.
And it can go like in the completely opposite direction. The dungeon master is trying to make things good, and then the character or the players collectively decide to just start making evil choices.
Tomb of Horrors. If you whip out the Tomb of Horrors book, players pretty much resign themselves like, yeah, well, there's a pretty good chance we're going to die, and that is like, yeah, as a dungeon master, you technically are playing the bad guy. You are the final boss. You are the mid bosses. You could, if you're going to be completely evil and bash your heroes over the head, I'm pretty sure you're going to lose your party after a couple of sessions. But it does give you a chance to say, I am Dragon. I am, the fiery lord. I am the frost giant. I am the, that kind of stuff. So that really is the epitome of playing the bad guy. The only difference is if you don't give your heroes at least a chance, you're going to lose your party very quickly.
And some of your friends.
Yeah, or you're specifically saying this is a dungeon raid, or there actually is a mode for Dungeons and Dragons that says, yeah, this is going to be for advanced players. Put your things put your skills to the limit. And I've seen DMs do that and slaughter people and leave them absolutely upset and well, I had fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's just being an asshole if you can adamantly see people are pissed off and you declare, well, I had fun. But
then, I mean, sometimes you throw your players a bone, but then sometimes you want them to suck it up a little bit because, I mean, if this had no challenge, then this had no value. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and if it always feels good overcoming the massive odds. I think that's one of the reasons why roguelike games are coming back and people are enjoying it, because it's a matter of, yes, I've had my ship blown up so many times, I've given up giving it a custom name and naming its crew members after my friends. But hey, I did it. I did it this one time. I beat the Rebel flagship this one time, and I feel like I actually achieved something.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're being a good guy or a bad guy, I think it's safe to say that there has to be a challenge in either role. I mean, there's nothing fun about, like, playing a bad guy and just wandering through town and killing innocents.
Yeah.
People have to oppose you because there has to be a reason why you're being a bad guy.
Or if you are being a bad guy, then you need to have the challenge level equivalent. Like if you're playing a game where you are a dragon, humans are a threat to an extent, but you need to throw other dragons at this dragon because that is an equivalent threat, and you have to work your way up to hydras and chimeras and liches and dragoliches and those kind of things. I probably could stand here naming off fancy villains all day, but
you mentioned before we started there was a castle with wings. But that's a different game.
Yeah, that's Alexander. That's the reason you bought Final Fantasy IX. But you have to have an equivalent. If you're going to be one of the big bad guys, one of the dragons, one of those kind of people, you need an equivalent challenge, and you need a reason to be fighting them, which I guess bad guys fight each other all the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure, in fighting.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up the Autobots and the Decepticons. In the Transformers Fall of Cybertron game, in that when the story played out, first you did the Decepticons, and then you did the Autobots. And one of the things about like all those...
War.
Yeah.
Fall or War?
Well, there's Fall of it was War for Cybertron, then Fall of Cybertron.
I didn't play Fall, but I found that actually frustrating in War because, like, I'm running around, like, chronologically speaking, you play the Decepticons first. I'm running around, I'm shooting things, I've made an absolute wreck of the whole planet, and then he plays the Autobots. Okay, now we have to clean up the mess we just made, and
it's like they both punch in. Alright, well, see you Decepticons.
It'd be nice if you could at least have two alternative endings, like this is the one where the Decepticons win, this is the one with the Autobots, instead of here's the Decepticons, and now it's the Autobots' turn.
Yeah, I mean, I get, like, that they made that call when they went from Warcraft 3 to Warcraft 2, because in Warcraft 2 you played either campaign, and clearly if you did the Orcs campaign, the Orcs were going to take over the world. But in Warcraft 3, it had to be played in order for the story. So if there's one thing that I think bothers me, whether I'm playing the good guy or the bad guy, it's the feeling that, like, my actions have been out of my hands this whole time, and that I've just been kind of, like, feeding the game. It depends on the game, because sometimes I think it works to the game's advantage. If it's making you ask why you play these games is because you keep wanting this challenge to be there. It's almost like the game knows it has to be the necessary evil. Yeah. Well, I recommended Spec Ops to people to check out. I say we wrap up. Do you have any particular games you want to mention?
I would like to say, and I'm really hoping I'm saying this right. They're Dark Lord. I'm really hoping it's the one by Calypso, but it essentially is the best attempt to make a new Dungeon Keeper 2. I really feel that if EA wants to, maybe make a Dungeon Keeper 3, as long as they understand what they're doing, and the formula isn't broken. The formula can be built upon, the graphics can be improved, the art style can be updated, but I really think the dungeon games are the best chance to play a bad guy. You've got heroes invading your area, you've got traps you can put, it's got this nice base building mechanic, and it feels very isolated. You're not taking over the world from your dungeon. You're basically making your dungeon and doing that kind of stuff. It's a very benign way to do it. The heroes are coming to you, they're the ones trying to kill you, yada yada. And I would like to see a little more, like something I guess on the RTS front where you can play a huge overlord and actually take over everything and have it be a more serious art style. I mean, there is a scale between serious and cartoony. You're not necessarily completely serious or completely cartoony. You can, be a little bit over towards the serious end. And I've seen a lot of cartoony games that try to get a little bit more over the serious end with completely cartoony graphics, but then blood splurts everywhere, and that just feels artificial to me. But it would be nice to see, I guess, better examples of villains. Like, I want a villain that not necessarily I can relate to, but I can enjoy playing. The Joker and the person from 300 as our examples is a great one because there's someone without constraints. There's somebody who's just so chaotically evil they can do whatever the heck they want. But of course, there's more than one kind of villain. There's villains who have moral codes. All right, so I would like something maybe like Mass Effect or that kind of RPG, or even something along the lines of the Old Republic, where I have a chance to play as a bad guy, to do some kind of campaign, either to take over the world, or even just play a hero with very little regard. I mean, if you're a hero on a revenge story, it could just be you don't give a damn about anybody else. They're just tools. They're just pawns. The Valkyrie profile game for the DS did that, where you could play a hero and constantly sacrifice your own allies to gain more power, and that, of course, would lead to a particular ending. But it's like that was a story of a person along a path who was just crossing the line left, right, and center. Yeah. So they were the hero acting like a villain. So things like that, things like, and maybe just play a dragon, like a satisfying game.
Not somebody riding a dragon.
Not someone riding a dragon.
Just a dragon.
Yeah, I mean, Dragon Commander, not a bad one, but there's a lot more going on than you being a dragon.
Just say one game.
You don't play a bad guy in that though. You just play dragon in that.
I know, I'm just saying, you've said like 10 games.
Okay, so I guess as final closing point, like maybe give us something along the lines of, again, a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age-ish, old-style BioWare RPG where we are playing as a villain. You don't have to play as a villain and be an overlord trying to take over the whole world. You can still be a villain, you can still be a pirate, and here's your crew, and you're doing piratey things.
Yeah.
Because you're questing for power to be a more powerful pirate. I mean, you don't have to be a bloodthirsty maniac who takes over places, rapes and pillages. You don't have to be a cartoony villain to whom is technically the lesser of two evils. Like, there is a lot in the middle that people just need to spend more time exploring.
Yeah. Having discussed all of this, now I'm thinking, like, I would love to see, like, a new kind of Rampage-style game. One that just completely does away with all the morality and all the emotional subjectivity and just goes back to an angry, dangerous, crazy creature destroying things just for fun.
Well, an HD version won't hurt either.
Yeah, at least an HD version.
Yeah, just something to tide us over. Maybe, destroy the CN Tower in Toronto. That would be a little... All the times I've been told to stand on the glass floor, the ability to play as a giant lizard person, just rip that tower down and then break it.
Especially when it's lit up.
Oh,
or it's like trying to do like Morse code, like SOS. Help, help, help. Of course, if you do the Toronto level, you're going to be wandering around a bunch of half-finished condos, so the level is already like partially beaten.
Oh, and all the condos are finished just covered in glass, so you walk up, you punch on ones, and all this glass falls down. It's like, oh, well, that was very unsatisfying. It's kind of already wrecked now. I guess I could punch it a few more times. Is there anyone in here? No, there's no one in here because it's completely unaffordable to live here. But yeah,
I love the city, but goddamn those condos.
traffic gridlock, yeah. Or power to the villains.